At the moment you're watching me say these words, time may already have run out for the 5 people on board the Titan. That's a submersible somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean that's been missing since Sunday.
This is a very complex search, and the unified team is working around the clock to bring all available assets and expertise to bear as quickly as possible in an effort to solve this very complex problem.
As of today, we are on day 4 of a search that may have a 4-day limit.
The Titan set out with an estimated 96 hours of air.
There's only so much emergency oxygen available when you're on an experimental vessel the size of a minivan and you're 13,000 feet underwater. And the U.S. Coast Guard estimates, as of right now, Thursday morning, that air supply might be done. So listen, a lot has happened in the last 48 hours since we last did an explainer on this story, and we now know a lot more about the search effort, the specifications of the submersible itself, even about the company that owns it and why there were red flags long before that sub even hit the water. So let's go through it step by step, starting with the people we know are on board and just how close search teams have gotten to finding them.
Breaking news in the search for that lost submersible in the Atlantic, hundreds of kilometers off St. John. The Coast Guard says a Canadian P-3 Aurora aircraft detected, quote, underwater sounds.
A Canadian P-3 detected underwater noises in the search area. As a result, ROV operations were relocated in an attempt to explore the origin of the noises.
That noise, described as a banging sound, was heard by a Canadian plane that deployed sonobuoys into the water. And you can think of those as ultra-sensitive underwater microphones. And the noises themselves maybe, or hoped, to be coming from the 5 people on board the Titan. A British billionaire adventurer, a French underwater explorer, a wealthy businessman and his son, and the CEO of the company that launched the submersible in the first place, Stockton Rush.
They reported there was a pattern to it, that it was not just random banging.
And this here is the key, that the banging noises came at repeated, predictable intervals, 30 minutes apart, and continuing over a period of hours. That's why there's hope that these are man-made sounds and not just random ocean noises.
P.H. Nargilay has an extensive background in submersible piloting. And this is what he would have done. He would have tried banging, he would have done it on a schedule so that you could distinguish it from the normal background noise.
So now the US Navy is analyzing the sounds, trying to use them to pinpoint exactly where they came from. Because, you know, with multiple sonobuoys, you could theoretically begin to triangulate the sub's position based on when the noise registers on each device. But when you're looking for a needle in a haystack in a 13,000-foot water column at depths where light does not penetrate, well, it's a start.
It is possible to attach a cable if you had a crane on the surface, but my understanding is that equipment is days away.
Let's talk about the search, and then I'll talk about the rescue. So this is a truly multinational effort. The U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, the Canadian Coast Guard, the Canadian Armed Forces, other commercial vessels in the area, they're all under a unified joint command. There are planes in the air, C-130s and P-8s, ships in the water, even a submarine. France has diverted a vessel with a subsea robot. The Canadian government says additional assets are coming from Great Britain, from Germany, and a Canadian Navy ship is even equipped with a 6-person mobile hyperbaric recompression chamber, which, in a best-case scenario, could be used to treat decompression sickness if the crew can be found, extracted from the sub, and brought back to the surface. But let's talk about that. Any rescue operation depends heavily on what exactly may have gone wrong.
There's quite a long list of things that could have gone wrong. The worst case probably being an implosion of the hull or the viewport. The 2 things that we were trained to really watch out for is 1, entanglement. The second is an electrical fire or an electrical short.
We know the submersible was heading towards the wreck of the Titanic. That's about a 2.5-hour trip, 13,000 feet to the ocean floor. But let's just put that in perspective. You know, a recreational diver might go to 130 feet. A submarine might operate at 1,000 feet. Sunlight stops shining at about 3,300 feet. Then you have the Titanic and the ocean floor, almost 4 times that distance. The submersible lost contact about 2/3 of the way down.
There's 2 sources of communication. There are these little text messages they can send back and forth to the ship, and then there's safety pings every 15 minutes that just says, we're still here, the sub is still working. Both of those stopped an hour and 45 minutes down.
That's David Pogue. He's a CBS journalist who's actually been on the Titan. The best case scenario is that the crew could have jettisoned weight, like a scuba diver might, to become buoyant. But search teams, they haven't found the sub on the surface, and they've covered tens of thousands of square kilometers. Meanwhile, the clock is still ticking. Oxygen's still running out. Even if they make it up from the depths of the ocean, the crew can't escape from the inside. The sub is literally sealed and bolted shut.
So maybe they're out there bobbing away, but remember, they're bolted in from the outside. So they have no way to get out or get more air.
Which brings us to the other problem. When you're talking about Titanic-level depths, you're talking about enormous pressure on the submersible itself.
The pressure is extraordinary, and it's something which is very hard to correlate. So it's 6,500 pounds per square inch. And so if you were to relate that into some kind of tangible metaphor, it would be 2 adult elephants who are balancing on your thumbnail. That's the actual displacement that you'd be exposed to.
Which brings us to 2 more possible outcomes, that there was some critical structural failure, the entire sub being compressed, squished on all sides.
We've taken a regular styrofoam coffee cup, and that's then strapped to the outside of the submersible in a net bag. And when we eventually come up topside and recovered, the actual same coffee cup is basically a that size.
Or maybe there was a leak, in which case the weight of the incoming water inside would gradually weigh the submersible down, causing it to sink no matter how much weight it shed, like a car filling with water. At that point, there'd be no escaping. This question, was the Titan safe, is going to be asked more and more as time goes on, and I'll show you why. This is a court filing from a 2018 lawsuit against OceanGate Expeditions. That's the company that operates the sub. A former employee sued for wrongful termination, saying he tried to raise safety concerns and was fired for it. Now, in the statement of facts, he says he was told repeatedly that no scan of the hull could be done to check for delaminations, porosity, and voids of sufficient adhesion. Translation, he called for more testing to make sure the ship wouldn't fall apart, and he was told no. And that OceanGate instead would rely solely on their acoustic monitoring system that they were going to install in the submersible to detect the start of hull breakdown when the submersible was about to fail. That, the employee suggested, would be too little too late. Also in the statement of facts, that the ship's only viewport was only certified to a depth of a little over 4,000 feet. That's nowhere near how deep the submersible was planning on going. The lawsuit itself ultimately settled out of court. You know, a profile that I was reading called the company's CEO, Stockton Rush, a daredevil inventor. Listen to him speaking on a podcast a few years ago, and you'll see why.
I mean, anything when you're trying something outside the box, people inside the box think you're nuts. When we started out, we did have cases where a travel agent or a travel consultant would lead them to believe this was like going to the Four Seasons and booking a ziplining trip. And we'll never be like that.
Remember the CBS journalist we heard from earlier, the one who's actually been on board the Titan? He's pointed out repeatedly how there are bits and pieces of the submersible that almost seem like they've been MacGyvered together.
Taking a completely new approach to the sub design, and it's all run with this game controller and these touch screens.
From plumbing pipes as ballast to ceiling lights picked up at a camping store.
I got these from Camper World, and they are LED lights in here, and a nice little decorative feature. We have a number of cameras that are actually security cameras. A lot of subs have custom-made video capture systems. By getting rid of that and just saying, look, we just want to capture the image and know where we are, we can use these off-the-shelf components.
Now, let's be absolutely clear. The company says it's worked with NASA on the most important part of the submersible, that is to say, the hull itself. And, you know, if you're going to spend money, that's where you spend it. But all of this just underlines an approach to innovation that can, at times, seem a little cavalier. Consider this from OceanGate's own blog on why the Titan isn't actually certified by any reputable standards organization. Bringing an outside entity up to speed on every innovation before it is put into real-world testing is anathema to rapid innovation.
There's a limit. You know, at some point, safety just is pure waste. I mean, if you just want to be safe, don't get out of bed, don't get in your car, don't do anything. At some point, you're going to take some risk, and it really is a risk-reward question. I said, I think I can do this just as safely by breaking the rules.
So, where does all of this leave us? Well, sort of where we started. The search goes on, but hope is disappearing with each passing hour. And spare a thought for those on board, if they are indeed stuck deep below. 4 days now, trapped all alone inside a 22-foot hunk of carbon fiber and titanium with a single window looking out onto pitch black, freezing cold, likely hungry, extremely tired, confined to a small space, slowly running out of air. Their ordeal is absolutely terrifying. We'll be right back.